Hello, friends on Patreon. It has been a while since I gave a segment on a lesson on something. So I decided I've been spending the last several days, about 4 days, spending time with neurologists with the American Academy of Neurology and about 15,000 neurologists. And I've led some workshops, and I've performed some shows, and I've attended workshops. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity to give a lesson on some things that neurologists are talking about that a cognitive anthropologist can understand and impart to you. So, number one, I have a little list that I made here. Number one is Zoom fatigue. Zoom fatigue is something that neurologists are talking about, and they're engaged in and interested in. And a big part of Zoom fatigue is really video conferencing fatigue, but we use the term Zoom fatigue because Zoom is the program that has taken hold during this time period, which is really strange because things like WebEx and Skype and Facebook Messenger and FaceTime existed prior to the pandemic, but Zoom is the one that has become the Kleenex of tissues and the Xerox of copy machines. So it's Zoom fatigue is the term. When we're talking about Zoom fatigue, the big thing that I didn't understand originally is this idea that in a common interaction, you have the speaker and you have the audience. And a speaker is interested about how they look, what their background looks like, what they're going to say, their ability to make eye contact with the audience, their energy level, exaggerating their body language and their emotions, where an audience can sort of relax and sit in the dark and can nod if they want to and can write things down or check their phone or check their email, right? But on Zoom, there isn't a speaker in an audience. Everyone is a speaker because we all have our cameras on and all of our heads are really big and we are all looking into each other's faces and we know that we're being seen at every moment. And so we have to heighten our posture and change the way we react and nod and react in bigger ways. And neurologists are studying this and seeing that people who are not used to being a speaker all the time or being what's often called on all the time are feeling incredible fatigue from being on Zoom. And this is something I didn't understand beforehand because that's just not something I experience. Whenever I'm in an audience, I am also sort of on and capture the attention of the speaker or the teacher. But I can absolutely see how this can be exhausting to people, that's not part of their normal life. And so I've now started to try and incorporate pieces where I let people relax or take a break or let them know that they can turn their camera off if they don't want to, in the same way that the magic research that was done by Joshua Jay at the University in New Jersey, that magicians shouldn't force people to be audience participants because there are people who really want to be and there are people who really don't want to be. And if they don't want to be, we really shouldn't force them. The old books used to say, you can't let someone say no or they'll all say no. You have to force them. Well, no, we need to instead choose people who want to participate and bring them up on stage. So in the same way, I now want to change the way I'm interacting with Zoom to let people choose if they want to participate. And I'm trying to be more conscious and conscientious of people's needs in that way. And so there were lots of things about Zoom fatigue, but that was a big one to think about, is the fact that everyone feels they have to be a speaker and on and ready to speak at any moment, and that everything has to be perfect, and that can be really exhausting for people if we're in any position as a speaker, as a teacher, as a student, and to realize that we don't need to be that on. And as this goes on and we get used to this being a normal part of our life, my hope is that people will feel less need to be that on all the time when they're using this tool. And we can go back to just phone calls, and we can go back to group calls, and we can go back to not having to see each other's faces. And sometimes it's okay to take meetings like that. The next topic I wanted to mention, and I have several on my list here, is mindfulness-based stress reduction. So I've been doing a lot of work with the Area Agency on Aging around the country with a show that I at first called Magic and Mindfulness, now Magic, Music, and Mindfulness, where at the end of each show we have a mindfulness exercise. And a big part of mindfulness is about being aware of the truth of ourselves and our bodies in this moment. That we don't get so captured in the screen and leaning forward and just all in the head, but that we take a moment to realize that my shoulders are up by my ears and to do something, a stretch to bring that down and get out of that and roll the shoulders. That we're making sure to learn from ophthalmologists who tell us to do the 20-20-20 rule, where we if we're going to be looking at a screen for 20 minutes, we then choose a spot 20 feet away and look at it for 20 seconds and make sure that our eyes adjust to that and then come back into this so that we don't get caught into this. That we think about our breath, that we think about our toes and our fingers and our back and our neck and our body, and we release a lot of those stresses. And very often these can be done through exercises, breathing exercises, meditational exercises, body awareness exercises where you think about different parts of your body, that you think about the sounds and the smells around you in this time. And so I've been reading a lot about these mindfulness exercises that neurologists are finding to be very, very healthful for people, especially when we're trying to have a work-life balance at our computer, in our office, at home, all at the same time. And we're working these long days. It used to be that people prized being hard-working, that I worked so hard every day. I pulled out, 30 bales of coal today. But now people talk about how long I worked. I worked a 20-hour day. I worked a 16-hour shift. And so we're working these incredibly long hours, and even working when we're in the restroom or when we're eating dinner or on and on and on, that it's just constant. And so taking time for these mindfulness exercises help our brain, help our body, help our stress, help our sleep, help so much of our daily lives. The next topic. This was a big one. How to address patient bias against neurologists of diverse backgrounds. Now, this goes back to some of my work in the Helping Hospitals Heal world, some of my work as a board member of the Inclusion Center for Community and Justice, where we have the diversity camps and the inclusive camps called Anytown. And I had a few neurologists hire me to do some one-on-one consulting because they're facing problems where patients come in and say, if someone's a woman, if someone's Sikh, if someone's Latinx, they say, well, you don't look like a doctor. Are you my nurse? I want a doctor. And they wanted to know how to cope with this. And there was a lot of struggle back and forth. And I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'm going to tell you my answer. My first answer comes from ideas that I may have mentioned before here on Patreon, that I particularly liked, a book by a fellow named Jerry Spence, who wrote a book called How to Argue and Win Every Time. And in it, he says, if you go to a lumberjack and you say to that lumberjack, don't cut down those trees, we need to save the spotted owl. The lumberjack is probably going to say, I don't care about the spotted owl. My job is to cut down the trees. And we can give that lumberjack endless paperwork about the spotted owl and why it's important and why we need to preserve it. But that's not going to change the lumberjack's mind, because what's on the lumberjack's mind is, my job is to cut down these trees, and that's how I feed my family and pay for my house. I don't care about the spotted owl. Tell me how I'm going to feed my family and pay for my house. And so until we start answering the question that person has, we're not going to be able to overcome and sway them to our side. In the same way, if we say to a patient, you're being a bigot, you're being racist, that's not going to sway them to our side. And a physician only has about 15 minutes with a patient, right? And they need to stabilize that patient and help that patient and make decisions and get around, to other patients that are on the floor. So rather than saying, when I teach diversity, I don't go to people and say, this is where I need you to be, and if you're not here, you're wrong. Instead, I start with where people are at, and then I try to move them forward towards the goal. So if we start with where the patient is at, this individual has come to this institution for care. That's why they came here. They left their house. They drove here. They walked in the door, they signed in, they waited, they came here for care. And they have a vision of what that care looks like. And they are frightened. They're frightened because they're in pain, they have care, and a lot of prejudice is about fear. It's fear of the other, it's fear of the unknown. Maybe they have been quite cruel to people who are of Latin backgrounds. Perhaps they only know about Latin people from the movies and television shows and or certain news channels that have demonized them. And so they're frightened that they will not receive the quality of care that they want, that they believe in their head that if someone who looks like House came in, that person would give them a higher quality of care, right? So I said there are a couple of ways to do this. One is to do what I do when I'm a strolling magician. If I'm hired by Smith & Wesson Guns for their hospitality suite, and which I have been many times, everybody there is like Pete the Cat. Well, right? They're these big, gregarious guys, and I'm not that guy. And if I come up and just say, hey, you guys want to see some magic? They were quite cruel to me. But if instead I come up and I say, the CEO of Smith & Wesson and the Secretary of the Food and Drug Administration has hired me to share some magic with you. Can I show you some magic? Then suddenly I am bona fide, supposed to be there, I must be great, and they want to see the magic. In the same way I've said, when patients do this to you, it might be good to say to them, you know, I spent 4 years at Columbia and 4 years at Harvard and 4 years at the Mayo Clinic, and I'm the only neurologist in the hospital today, and I would love to help you, right? You let them know your credentials because they don't know just because you're wearing the white jacket or because it says physician or because you say you're the magician. They don't know that you are who you are. Another way is to diffuse with humor. And I do this a lot with magic. I had a fellow that works at a healthcare system in Florida that has a thick accent from his country of origin. But he speaks multiple languages. I mean, I don't fully. And I have him walk in and say, hello, my name is, and you can tell from my accent that I grew up in Wisconsin. And it gets a laugh. And then he says, actually, I studied here, and I studied here, and I studied here, and now I'm so excited to be able to be your physician to treat you. And so being able to create a laugh, to diffuse the situation, to deal with the fact that what they're facing is fear, to let them know that you are here to care for them, to let them know that you are the one and only, that has to happen. I also made it very clear to the physicians that even if the patient doesn't want to be seen by them, they need to stabilize the patient before they can release them. I had one neurologist who said, look, if they don't want to be seen by me, I give them the paper to sign, throw them into the street, and I say our hospital isn't going to care for somebody that's a bigot. And I think that that's really the wrong path. I think that's a lot of what I talk about in some of my other talks is mercury poisoning, is this built-up poisoning within a person. And we can't do that. We have to take care of the person, do the best we can. I remember as a magician one time I was performing for some wealthy oil people, and one of them took my deck of cards and said, I want to show you a trick. And he ripped a bunch of them in half, threw them on the table, poured a glass of wine on top of it, and said, I just made the magician disappear. Instead of getting angry, I said, thank you very much, sir. I hope you all have an enjoyable meal. Walked over, grabbed another deck of cards, went to the next table. Because when we're in service of others, we cannot change them. The next piece of this is several of these physicians asked me how to be an advocate for others. They say that they see their fellow coworkers being mistreated. This is an important idea. And I want to share this because it is important to be an advocate for others, but it is also important to honor those others. And so have a conversation with people and say, I have seen these things happen here in the healthcare system or in our office or we're working. If this was to happen to me, This is how I would want you to advocate for me if you were comfortable. How would you like me to advocate for you? And some people say, oh, no, I'll handle it. Or, oh, no, it doesn't bother me. Or some people say, oh, it would really be nice if you could step in and say this, or if you could step in and share that, or if you could just have my back and stay in the room. And so, this happened to me early in my career at the Magic Castle. I had people that were quite, vicious with me one time in one of the rooms. And I said later to the managers, it would be very nice if we could have a button in some of the rooms that the performers could push if things were going really bad with really drunk people, and we could get a manager to come in and be an advocate for us. And so having that conversation with people about how can I support you if and when these things happen. So there's more on that if anybody wants to talk about it later. I don't want to make this too long. Positive psychology. I gave a lecture on positive psychology at the University of Tulane a couple of months ago. I think it's a wonderful area of psychology that's emerging, that you can now get degrees in the psychology of positivity. And I'll be learning more about that, sharing more later. COVID and leadership, how to create a department that promotes wellness. Oh, the Salem witch trials. I thought this was really interesting. A neurologist came on and talked about, if you don't know this about the Salem witch trials, and some of you may, but I didn't, said that that the year that the Salem witch trials happened, there had been a terrible drought, and all of the crops had died, except for this rye, like rye bread that they grew. And the rye bread was grown in these bogs, and they were eating a diet that was mostly this rye bread grown in the area that had a rye ergot, and so had an ergot alkaloid with 1%, and so that had some LSD in it, and it had poisoning, right? It neurotoxin in it, and it was a 1% solution, and that of course had an even bigger effect on the children that were eating this and surviving on this ergot poisoning, and that creates some of these spasms and some of these hallucinations and some of these things that they think now may have caused. Now, not all of it. A lot of this is also how we interact with group consciousness, and how we have a mob mentality and people trying to protect themselves and punish others and other problems as well. But this may have started some of these horrible things that happened in the Salem witch trials, was the fact that people were ingesting this neurotoxin in heavy doses that particular year in that particular place. So I'll look more into that, but I wanted to throw that out there. And then the last piece that I spent some time studying was I've been interested lately in migraines. And there's some really great advances. I listened to 5 different panels on migraines. And I don't suffer with them, but it's genetic migraine, so you either get them or you don't. And it's overwhelmingly affects women. But it's a good time for migraine health right now. In the last 3 years, there have been 5 brand new treatments that have been approved by the Food and Drug Administration to treat migraines. And so if you are someone that suffers with migraines, lives with migraines, especially if you get them multiple times a month, if you have a lot of headaches as well as migraines, if you have nausea, which isn't always just about that, but about wanting to lie down or be in a dark room, if you see any auras around lights, bright lights, or it's not like the movies, right? It's not as intense as that. But if you're someone that has this, and it's trouble for you, now might be a good time to see a neurologist and talk about the new treatments and new cares that are out there. Some are medicine-based, some are surgical, some are alternative medicine, but are now accepted by the Food and Drug Administration and are approved for treating children. So there's a lot of good science that they were really excited about about migraines. So if you know someone who has migraines, now is a good time to revisit their neurologist and do it across Zoom and have those discussions to get that healing and to get that help. Also, during this time, I've been taking a lot of classes, a lot of lessons and trading lessons where I teach or I do a free show for somebody in exchange for their family in exchange for lessons in their area of expertise, and it's really been a fascinating time. Thank you to so many of you for continuing to support on here. We've dropped from 52 at one time to now we're at 44 people that are on here. And it's okay, I understand, but it's helped so much throughout this year, and I've used the money here and have used that to allow me to give away free shows almost every day to Title I schools, to healthcare organizations, to charities, 501c3 charities, to shelters, retirement homes, etc. And it's really made a big difference in my life and the lives of others that you've allowed me to continue to do this. If there are things that I promised at the level that you have donated money, please let me know what of those things you would like. If you would like me to send you magic tricks or teach you magic or teach you to juggle or do a magic show for some group you care about. Also, let me know if there's anything you'd like me to cover as a topic in all of this. But this was just a little 20-minute update on a lesson on what's going on in the world of neurology and a little bit of cognitive anthropology. I've rejoined the Society of the Anthropology of Consciousness and will be speaking at their upcoming virtual conference. And so there'll be more to come from that. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much. Bye.